Okay, howdy. Greetings, everyone. So we're headed into video number 5, session 4, and topic number 3, Trump Cyrus calling in our series about brakes and blinkers, how God is signaling humanity and signaling the Christians what his direction is, what his will is, where he's going with the current circumstances that we're all experiencing together. Okay, so that's the nature of my series. Now, so today we're going to talk fireworks. Okay, because how can you talk about Trump and his presidency and his what I call his anointing or his calling from God? How can you bring that up without fireworks? Wow. There's still YouTubes and everything out there where people wear a MAGA hat and they practically get attacked and because they're wearing a MAGA hat. So anyway, yeah, I'm gonna dive into it today. It's actually one of my favorite topics, and I actually believe he's one of the best presidents we've ever had in light of the circumstances. I think it's very equivalent to George Washington and Abraham Lincoln and the pressures they were under. But for full disclosure, I want you to know that I'm not a Republican. In February of 2022, when I recognized some of these things on this board about Satan using politician puppets, and when we get down here, you'll see that I believe both parties have significant corruption, and so I got out of the Republican Party in February of 22, and I'm an independent politically. So I'm not just supporting Trump because I'm in the party. I'm not in the party. In fact, I'm very critical of the party and feel like Trump is the mainstay of the party. And when he's gone, we'll see what happens to that party. It's an interesting thought there. Okay, so let me state the premise up front, like I have been on each topic. Donald J. Trump has been called and anointed to serve as President of the United States of America, and I have been saying this publicly and online since 2015. In order to drain the swamp, why has God anointed him and called him and appointed him and anointed him? It's to drain the swamp of evildoers, restore the republic to its intention, its original intention, to reset the economy, and to be a blessing to and among the nations. I believe what Donald Trump is doing is actually, because our country has world influence, an effective president in this historical time we live is definitely going to have world importance and influence. And obviously, if you pay attention, you may not like him or you may not, whatever, but you have to admit he's having pretty radical influence on world leadership. Okay. So now, how did this come about in my own life? Back in 2015, when he ran for president in the Republican Party, remember the debates they were having? He came down the escalator and then the debate started. He had 15 other Republican opponents. And I remember the newsmakers and the newscasters laughing, literally laughing out loud about his candidacy and the possibility or the impossibility of him becoming president in their mind, right? That it happened. If you don't remember, I'm reminding you right now, it happened. And in September of 2015, just 2 months before the election, Trump was kind of in trouble because things with that Billy Bush thing happened, and in a sense, he was the candidate for the Republican Party, but things were coming out. It wasn't looking good, if you will. A Christian guy named Lance Wallnau, he wrote a book called God's Chaos Candidate, and he was talking about Trump. And what he inferred was that in Isaiah 45, the Old Testament chapter that prophesies about the Persian king Cyrus, okay? The Babylonians were in power at the time of this prophecy, and the Israelites had been exiled to Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar and others. But God prophesied that a Persian king named Cyrus, who wasn't even born at that time, would come to power and help the exiled Israelites go back to Jerusalem, rebuild the city. Okay, and Lance Wallnau said, "Hey, I think Trump is like the Cyrus of Isaiah 45." And when I heard it, you guys, when I read his book, I don't think I've ever referenced or read his book again since then. But in my spirit, it resonated like, you know what? I think that's true. I think that's true about this guy, that he is anointed for a special purpose, like Cyrus was in Isaiah 45. Now, I want to read to you another prophetic person, used to be EMT, fireman type person. And around 2011, he started receiving prophetic words, and he put them together in a 20-page document. I'm going to read 2 or 3 paragraphs here about things that Mark Taylor prophesied about President Trump. And this was back in, let me check, in April of 2011. And then the next page I'm going to read, it was in October of 15. Okay, so he jumped ahead. But let me read what he said. Way back, he says, "Are you still not convinced that he's my anointed and that he's the one I have appointed?" He's talking about Donald Trump. "Why can no one figure it out? The news media, the people, and so-called wise. Why, when he's attacked, do his poll numbers rise? Those who attack him, their numbers go low, even to the point of a big fat 0. It's simple to see. This man I have appointed, for in my word is your answer. I said, do not touch my appointed or anointed, especially my prophets." So Mark Taylor's implying that Donald Trump is a prophet, meaning he's speaking forth God. He's being God's brakes and blinkers. He's being God's voice like a prophet would be as president of the United States. That's pretty shocking right there, my friends. Okay, in October of 2015, he said this, Mark Taylor, in a prophetic word. He said, "The Spirit of God says, the gatekeeper, the president of the United States is the spiritual gatekeeper." Whoa, that's a heavy statement right there. "I have chosen this man, Donald Trump, and anointed him as president for such a time as this." Now, this is in October of 2015. The election occurred in early November. "Can you not see this? For even his name, Donald, meaning world leader, Trump, meaning get the better of or to outrank or defeat someone or something, often in a highly public way." How relevant is that to what Donald Trump has done and achieved? "This man I have chosen will be a faithful world leader, and together with my army," no, he's talking about Christians who stand up to acknowledge him, defend him, and honor him, "will defeat all of America's enemies in the spiritual and in the natural." You see, you guys, this is why I talk about this topic here, about Satan and Lucifer wanting to come against what's good and right, and will support truth and righteousness and justice. And I'm telling you that I think God appointed Donald Trump as a Cyrus to get in this battle. And I believe actually he may be doing more than many, if not most, pastors in America to be a spiritual gatekeeper. And I think that's what he's saying here. "You will see it manifest before your eyes. I will use this man to shut gates, doors, and portals that the past president had opened." That was Obama. He opened gates, doors, and portals this past president has shut. "My army shall not be silenced. They will begin to see he is the one." So Mark Taylor is prophesying that people will begin to see, even in the midst of all the negative, the impeachments and the negative press and the hate, literal hate for him, that people will begin to see that he is the one. I want to support that because I've been saying it from the beginning. "He is the one I have chosen. They will begin to rally around him and keep him covered in spiritual support. And as you gain ground, they will say, America is not frozen." Because he prophesied earlier that America has frozen because of the corruption and so forth, and that Donald Trump was going to be a gatekeeper and help, open these doors and open these gates and change the atmosphere in America. Okay, so that's Mark Taylor right there. That's really strong and really powerful. Since 2015, you guys, my understanding is I've read personally tens of prophecies about Trump. I think there's hundreds literally out there and around the world about Trump's presidency, about 2 terms. Now I realize that some of us got it wrong. We thought they were going to be consecutive. We thought for sure he was going to win. Frankly, I think he did. I think there were shenanigans. I still do. I think a reckoning is coming for that. Trump's been talking about that. Don't forget his job, what God has him to do. He's going to uncover things. He's going to drain the swamp. That topic's going to come back. Okay. Which proves again more of his Cyrus calling. Okay. And so included 2 terms. Well, now he's in a second term. So the prophecy was fulfilled, just not in our time. That's one of the things that I've discovered about prophecy is the most difficult thing is timing. And we oftentimes, all of us, myself included, want to get ahead of God's time because we're impatient. Okay. Okay, I'm going to go to Isaiah 45. You can read it yourself. I'm going to pull it up and read just a couple verses at the end, but I just want to summarize in like the first 10 verses what God said about this Persian king Cyrus, what he was going to do, and the parallel between what he's done through Trump. So again, Ecclesiastes says what's been done will be done again. Okay, there tends to be the cyclical repeating, different names, different characters, but kind of the same situation arising, and I believe it is in our day. Okay, he calls him in verse 1. He says Cyrus is his anointed. He says, I'll take him by the right hand, which is a parental thing. I'll guide him. I'm going to guide Cyrus to subdue nations and strip kings of their armor. Now you think about the practicality of some of these things, of what Trump is doing internationally. To open doors and gates. I will go before him. In other words, I'll go before him to lead the way, if you will, like a good parent does, okay? He will level mountains. I don't know all what that means, but, mountains are barriers. Mountains are blockades. And, New Testament talks about speaking to mountains of maybe obstacles or whatever. And God says, I'm going to level mountains for Cyrus. And it seems that he has done that for Trump. He will break gates of bronze and cut bars of iron. So he'll get through really difficult situations. I think that's unfolded. I will give you treasures of darkness, riches stored in secret places. In other words, for Cyrus, he says, treasures of darkness. In other words, where are they? And riches stored in secret places. Well, you guys, it appears to me totally that Trump, through Doge and used Elon Musk, again, another guy that's not a Christian man, but God using them to expose all these billions of dollars going to causes and things that the American people would never support, but were being done nefariously and secretly. Well, it says here that God is going to give Cyrus treasures of darkness and riches in secret places, and Trump's talking about tariffs. How much flack has he taken for leading us into tariffs to make the economic system of the world, which is now obviously international, everybody affects everybody else, but it's been radically unfair to America, and we have been funding the world in nefarious ways and through paying tariffs. Trump is changing that so much so, you guys, that he may eliminate income taxes for us. In fact, I'll almost guarantee when he hints at what he's going to do it. Possibly starting next year, we won't be paying income taxes. Can you imagine how that could change families in America and help the family, etc.? It says God, when he does this for Cyrus, it says, so you will know I am the Lord. I summoned you by name, Cyrus. Well, interesting, Trump. We just read what his name means. God has summoned him by name. Donald, world ruler. Trump, someone who gets the best of others publicly. I can't make this stuff up. Okay. And then God says, I'm going to do this for my chosen. The immediate context was, I'm going to do this for my chosen Israelites who are held captive, exiled in Babylon. And when the Persian king Cyrus takes, he's going to send them back to Jerusalem and finance the thing. And so God is going to finance Trump for the sake of the chosen, I believe, in America, so we can move back to our Christian roots that I talked about in the first session, right? To reestablish the republic as a constitutional republic under God. But then it says about Cyrus that even though, Cyrus, you don't acknowledge me, I don't know if Trump is a Christian or not. I think maybe he is, but what level or where is he at? I don't know, and I'm not even certain about that. I don't know. I can't even say that. And that's what was true about Cyrus. And later on in that chapter, God says, are you going to argue with me that I choose a person who doesn't even acknowledge me to use him for my purposes to help my people get back to Jerusalem? Are you people going to argue with me about this? Woo, I tell you, there's some application there. So here's my interpretation. I gave the premise, some of the evidence, I believe. Here's the interpretation. Donald J. Trump is referenced by many prophets as my David. Now, King David in the Old Testament, you may or may not know, but is a revered man amongst Christian circles, that he was God's man. He was a man after God's own heart. He had some big sins, but he accomplished big things for God. Well, here we go. Moses was God's man. He was the humblest man on all the earth, but he struggled. David was God's man, a man after God's own. Oh, he sinned big time, right? He was unfaithful to his wife. He had the wife's husband killed, and he still remained in power, and God used him, even though he had some consequences because of that. Okay. Remember the political debate many years ago? I think it was with Dan Quayle that the Democratic guy said, "You're no John Kennedy." Well, it looks to me like Trump is a King Cyrus. It just looks like it fits. The application of the Bible says, give honor to how honor is due. The mainstream media and the puppet politicians have hounded him, impeached him, called him every nasty dictator, fascist name under the sun. I appeal to you, I admonish you, don't participate in it. You may find yourself resisting God. I believe that. I honestly believe that. Mark Taylor said that. Hey, don't come against God's anointed. When they came against Moses, what happened to them? When some came against David, what happened to them? You think, oh, that's different. Why is it different? An anointed of God is an anointed of God. Moses wasn't a perfect man. David certainly wasn't a perfect man, and yet they were called anointed, and God expected people to respond to what God was doing. And that's what it says in Isaiah 4. Woe to you if you say, I cannot do that. Use a Moses, a David, a Cyrus, a Donald Trump. Woe to you. Heavy stuff, folks. Okay. Now, the benefit of and value of knowing Trump is anointed or called. Here's what I got. Stay out of the weeds. You know, a lot of us have no idea all that Donald Trump is dealing with. Those big ticket items I gave, that he's draining the swamp, resetting the economy, being a gatekeeper for the Christian community. Tremendous things are going on. And I haven't even listed all the stuff that I think he's doing that are going to benefit America. Okay. And yet people are nitpicking still about his tweets or this or that or tariffs or this or that. And I feel like many of us don't know what we're talking about. We're nitpicking him to death. And we don't have the big picture. That's what I'm trying to do, is give you the big picture. Trust God with and through his man, Trump. His undertaking is huge, huge, magnanimous, huge, epic. We, the people, need him or somebody like him. I can't think of anybody else in American politics that could do what Donald Trump is doing. And lo and behold, God says, hey, he's the one I've chosen. Okay, playboy, billionaire background, whatever, he's the one I've chosen. I hope he's changed. I hope there's some spiritual renewal in his heart and life. I think there is, but I don't know for certain. But it doesn't look like that was the qualifier for him. He needs us in our prayers. He needs our support, and he needs us. And we have a republic. We, the people, are the governing body of America. So if God is indicating his support for someone, we should get on board. And I'll ask you to close. Does your church leaders stand with Donald Trump? That might be an indication of the status of your church. Food to think about. Next week, we're going to go on to Mafia Purge Accelerators. How can this thing get speeded up? We're going to talk about that next week. Thanks all. Have a great day.